All right, we are live on Facebook and on the three pages and YouTube and Zoom. We're going to play the intro and allow some people time to come in, and then we're going to bring Mary Rodwell up here. How's it going, everybody? We got Mary Rodwell in the house. It's our fourth and final show today. And we saved the best for last, although our other guests were absolutely tremendous. So let me get her up here now. And it's been about, I think, 4 or 5 weeks since we talked to her last. And she's always makes for a great conversation. So let me pull her up now. Yeah, there it goes. Video.
Start video.
There you go. How's it going, Mary?
I'm good. It's good to talk with you again, Todd.
Yes, it is. I always really enjoy our conversations. I think we talked, I want to say, right when it would have been, I am so, let me get my bearings. Okay, so I think it was in February. It was right before everything started happening, I think, because we had a lot of exciting shows, and you were kind of one of the first ones because we found a place to broadcast from. And yeah, we had an exciting. I really got a lot of that out of that last conversation. I shared it with a lot of people. So yeah, what's going on in your world?
Well, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I was told by a particular source that February was going to be particularly significant this year, as well as actually June. That's another one that I've been given. But for me, everything started to explode for most of us with this whole pandemic thing. Yeah. And for me, it's been, I almost feel, Todd, it's like we're in this rather bad B movie that's, that's happening now. And I think what is very confusing for most people, and it has been for me, even as a researcher, looking at all the different perspectives of what this means to us, and the narrative that we're getting from one source and the other narratives, it must be really difficult for people to try and work their way through what they're seeing happening, because it is all, become quite toxic very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting time, because on one hand, there's some pretty outlandish and cartoonish, no matter what narrative you follow or believe. There's some of the things that are occurring just don't make any sense at all. And then on the other hand, the way I look at it, and a lot of people that I resonate with, I'm excited. There's so many things that have been put into place, let's just say man-made, that are actually supporting what we call ascension, being in isolation, getting pulled out of our normal routines, things being taken away, And then also for some people, spending time with people that you've been cohabitating with for who knows how long that you never even talked to. So you're having to talk to them now. So there's a lot of stuff that although it looks one way, it's, you know, it's supporting our individual expansion.
I agree with you. And the way that I've looked at all human experience and our experiences, that we've chosen to be here at this time. And it's, you know, the reason is that we needed something significant to get people to refocus. And
Yeah.
I was talking to a 10-year-old about a week ago. This 10-year-old gets visited by the beings of light. He said that they come from a planet of light and that he comes from there. And that on that planet, he says, you instantly manifest. He said it's very much like a game down here because you have to work harder to manifest. But he did say, when I said, what is your understanding of what's going on now? And he quite plainly said to me, this is a reset, Mary. This is a reset. And I found, and the reset is because what he was talking about is, you know, the shift of consciousness into a greater awareness. That was what he was explaining to me. Now, this is a 10-year-old's perspective from his own connection to these light beings and where he believes he's from. And for me, it made absolute sense that we needed something very dramatic. And the thing is, I've discovered for myself, when you work therapeutically with people, it's not until their back is against the wall do people start listening to what they need to do to make changes. And this is forcing everyone, whether they like it or not, to, you know, rediscover themselves, but rediscover what matters to them, what is important. It is focusing us all now on what really, I think, only happens normally when we're faced with a grief, in severe grief, or with some major cataclysm. This is it, guys. You know, this is. So what does this all mean to you, and how are you going to approach it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because so many people that come on the show, you can relate I mean, they had, on their individual path, they had the same type of energetic force envelop their life, you know, and it was like this kid's describing, it was like, you know, I guess from a higher perspective, individuals such as myself and were forced to a certain place to take certain actions, and we were seen as crazy, of course, and we were listening to something outside of the physical realm, a part of us, and we were doing things. And of course, we've gotten all this point now collectively, but it looks like the same type of thing. You know, many of us were forced into isolation. Many of us were liberties, material stuff was taken away from us. All these successive traumas. I mean, it matches the same energy that so many people had individually that, you know, may identify or resonate with the term wave shower or first waver or starseed or, you know, those type of things. But yeah, so it looks like everybody's faced with that. I think about this. I think about the one thing that really, to me, would have a lot of impact, and I know you could probably appreciate this with working with children, is all these children being taken out of school and the energetic impact of their field of energy being altered from a compliant, conformist type of institutional type of habitual, you know, pattern into one of being around family, being at home, having free creative space, being allowed to, you know, roam around the backyard. Just that energy, I would think that's running rampant all over the world. That's got to be affecting us in a very positive way.
I agree absolutely, Todd. And one of the things that I've talked about many times is how these new generations say that school, conventional school, is toxic to them because they're being programmed, as one 9-year-old explained to me, that they're being programmed out of their light, as she called it. And then the teachers just press the keys. What we've got now is an energy which allows these children, whether they're homeschooled now or not, they are being at home. They're in their home environment, allowing them that freedom to start exploring and not having that extra impetus that's behind the programming, which we know has, for the rest of older generations, have made it more and more difficult to own your multidimensional self, simply because psychology says that unless your senses give you the information, you can't trust anything else. Now, what we're being asked to do and tasked to do, and the children are doing it already, is trusting their knowing, their sensing, their feeling, the downloads, or their communication with these different intelligences. And there's less and less boundaries now to contain that. And this is what I believe is part of the shift that has to happen if we are to become fully what we can be.
Yeah. And I mean, your work, we've talked about it on the previous shows, but the work with the children, I think, really stands out. I mean, even at some of the other stuff you told us, because I talked about it on shows for 2 weeks after we had our last show. And but the children, especially now, like even the way you opened up the show telling that story about the 10-year-old, they must really be, I mean, I don't know how many children you see, but they must be getting are being more open, so more receptive, getting more information. And I think also it would only make sense to me, because they're pulled out of that environment, they must be getting more confident in what's real and what's not real, I would think.
I think the difference between the generations and why they are now a lot more awake is because in terms of human consciousness, many of the adults now in older generations are exploring more openly consciousness. We've got scientists looking into consciousness. We've got now those that talk about their near-death experiences or their out-of-body experiences. Astral traveling is becoming more and more part of the mainstream. We're looking at people drawn into shamanism now and wanting to work from that level. Others taking ayahuasca to explore other realms. We've got those that are doing healing, energetic work, which are changing the way that we look at healing, because Reiki is becoming more and more acceptable, for example, this kind of thing. And meditation is being promoted more and more for health. So we've got this overall shift in mainstream where people want something more, are seeking something more, are knowing there's more going on, even though their earlier programming says, that you're only your physical body, etc. People now really allowing themselves to look at that narrative and say, it doesn't fit for me anymore. But the problem for them is still the lack of confidence in that ability, that awareness, because there's always that questioning. Am I getting carried away? Will I go crazy if I start doing this? Which is what, the things I get from people coming to see me is, I'm getting these downloads, or I'm seeing these beings, are you sure that I'm not going crazy or whatever? Until we talk about the veracity of the information, how useful it is to them, how it helps them understand more of their, 3D reality and what have you. And then this is you coming into wholeness. This is you becoming integrated into being who you really are. And now so the children are having parents or grandparents that are being a lot more receptive to what the child is saying. I've got my special friend who's blue and comes from this planet, or I've got this light being that comes to see me and takes me to planets or to different places. And the research that we've done with the Free organization came up with the most important data at all, in saying that only 25% of our experiences with these intelligences is physical. 75% is out of body. So now we're having to, if you like, remodel the way that we look at ourselves and honor the fact that we are so much more in terms of our multidimensional selves. And when this 10-year-old explained to me how on his planet before he came here, he could instantly manifest, he said, Mary, it's a bit like a game down here. He said, it's much harder to manifest, but he says, it was almost like saying, don't take it all too seriously. It's like this sense of, this is no big deal.
Yeah.
because for that for the new generations, this isn't. This is the norm. Where they come from, their origins is the norm for them. You know, when I was talking to another 10-year-old in Western Australia and explained to me he came from a planet that was blue and he was a blue being, and he said, I've come here as this center seed to connect with the planet and to help with the pollution going on. All these children mention connections and communication with animals, with plants, and often with crystals and what have you. They, to them, this is the new narrative. This is the new norm of what we are going to be evolving into as well. So I think this is a very exciting time.
I agree with you. I'm absolutely excited. And I have to check myself because I get a little frustrated with seeing some of the stuff that the events triggering people. But I know that's also actually a good thing. You know, I know that has to happen before the next step happens. And I think about the last time we talked, and you talked about these professionals, medical, scientific professionals that were gathering privately to support each other in their own awakenings. And I was really impressed and blown away by that, because I know that's just the tip of the iceberg. If that's happening there, it's got to be happening somewhere else. And it's just a matter of time before the truth, energetic truth vibe kind of expands to a point where it becomes mainstream. But after we talked, now this has all happened. And I'm thinking to myself, listening to you right now, wow, how many people in these older generations that haven't been open are being opened now, which doesn't just mean the potential of visitation or looking at their own shadows or, you know, being exposed to paranormal or out of bodies or whatever, but also questioning the narrative that we've been given. And I know you've been involved in this for a long, long time as a researcher and an experiencer, but I mean, I would think that, God, that could be as powerful a segment of the population that the children are. These elders, let's just call them the elder generations, that had so much conditioning, and we're talking about people that lived in the Depression through the World War II. I mean, these were hugely impactful on people's lives for their entire life, that are now looking at, hey, why can't I go down to the beach where it's a wide open space, but I can go to the grocery store where there's going to be 100 people touching everything? Why? What's up with that? It doesn't make sense. And then I also think, even if people that watch the news, there's a lot of contradictory information on the mainstream, which is kind of weird. You know, they don't have like a uniform delivery like they normally have in the past. So there's got to be that element too, that's kind of a wild card, you know?
I think that the fact is that some of it, the narrative, the mainstream narrative is so contradictory. There are so many different kinds of reports and information. People are really struggling to make sense of it. And I think the whole idea is now on a spiritual level to challenge you, to challenge your fears, and to say, are you going to allow yourself to be controlled by this narrative? Or are you going to start questioning? Are you going to wake up and start exploring, you know, more of what is going on here? And this is interesting, how there are still many that believe absolutely the government is absolutely right in its controls and everything that it's doing, and are quite willing to be locked down for as long as the government says, because they're terrified for their health. They're terrified their family is going to get this terrible disease, etc., etc. And so one of the things to becoming a shaman, as you know, is you have to transcend your human fears. So when do you get fed up of following that narrative and saying, hold on a minute, I'm going to start looking at this more deeply, because there are so many different avenues now that will give you, you know, at least pause for questioning some of that narrative, which may not have happened previously.
Well, I mean, if the questions start to be asked, I mean, it's pretty much, it's going to keep rolling And we all, I think, have been through that. We've all had our own experiences, and those questions start, and you can't go back. So these people in these elder generations, I mean, they actually potentially represent a tremendous energetic force too, like the children, just coming from a different place. In fact, it could be more powerful because they would actually be transforming kind of a dense conditioning kind of frequency. And you know what happens when the deeper, let's say the darker, the more negative the charge, the more positive the upside can be. So this is a kind of a cool twist. Yeah, and I think too, I look at even things like, they've been in an environment, as we all have. I just saw some pictures of LA, and this, I've been to LA many times, and the skies are blue. I mean, they're like, like the same pictures they had in China and some of the other big cities where they stopped all the factories and everything. That's got to have, energetically speaking, because it's all energy, that's got to have a huge impact on everything, on the animal kingdom, on the plant kingdom, in our kingdom. I mean, and this is not even to say what's happening in the let's just say the higher sensory realms. As we know, as you know so well, because you've been a leader out there, there's other family or civilizations or kingdoms walking side by side with us that we don't actually see at this point, for the most part, and they're part of this too, aren't they?
We're all connected. I mean, when you look at the theory of the quantum hologram, which many physicists now are saying makes up what we call consciousness or our reality or whatever, everything is connected. And the more that we understand we're connected to everything, then that changes our attitude to how we interact with it, in terms of a far more loving, compassionate, caring, that everything matters. Every one of us matters. And when you start looking at that from that perspective, then everything shifts. And these beings are there to I mean, I've always felt when people ask me, what's the agenda or what's the main agenda? And I think there are many agendas. There's many programs with the numbers of different intelligences out there. But the main one has been, when people have had interactions with these intelligences, is psycho-spiritual transformation. We noticed 85%. That was what happened. So there is, the fruits of contact, as I call it, when people sort of say, well, it's, there are those still that are traumatized, those still that have had experiences which have been really difficult. And sometimes it's not necessarily extraterrestrial, and they don't always realize that. But the bottom line is, we've come in as souls. We've come into experience. We've come in to see the duality, to experience the duality. And when we start looking at our attitude to it, then we actually change the energy of it anyway, because everything teaches us something, no matter how dark or difficult or challenging. They're the ones when we grow the most. So this is really a brilliant way of getting, everyone to start facing their own fears, their own truths, what really matters to them. And nothing's better than being trapped at home with yourself.
Cleaning out the kitchen. Everybody's spring cleaning now. Yeah. And I like what you said too about there's not one agenda. Even if you're only talking about the surface, our lives as we've known it, it might look like, even if you went back to the Roman Empire, I mean, there certainly were someone or something having a majority of influence or control or power, but there's always been multiple agendas. And so on that note, I've been sitting here observing. Of course, it's the fear-based program. It's very easy to look at because, anyone who's been doing research, even just for a few years like me versus someone for many years like you, can see, because they can see what's happening. It's almost like a false flag energy, just expanded, but it carries so much of that convoluted, it doesn't always add up. I mean, a contradictory kind of stuff. And then you're just going, okay, I've seen this before. But then there's another side. And that other side is the, what I call the savior-based programming, where someone's going to come in and we're going to save you. and you know, we've listened to so many narratives for so long, and we look back at our history, at our ancestors, and we see the same thing. And so it's very hard to trust anything outside of us that we don't and give our control or give our power over to. And I look at it as an equal threat. Just personally, I'm not saying I'm right, but like too much light can pull me off the 0 point, no different than too much dark. But that seems to be getting louder too. And the narrative, of course, I'm talking about is the QAnon and white hats in the you know, infiltrating deep state and that whole thing. What are your thoughts on that?
It's good that you've brought that up, Todd, because you know, for all of us, no matter how open we are to looking at alternative narratives, it becomes very, very confusing because one contradicts another and whatever. Certainly, I'm looking at the QAnon and the white hats agenda and what they're saying, and I think you need to look at all the narratives and ultimately find your own resonance to what feels right. I mean, I'm a bit in the same mind that, you know, I've always come from the phrase that moderation in all things and moderation in moderation, that the middle road is not usually far from, you know, the balance that I'm looking at, sort of the balance there. I know what I'd love to believe. Yeah. But I also have to be careful about what I'd love to believe. Sit with the resonance of, okay, so what is it that I need to be aware of right now? And it is about being in the now and seeing how things are unfolding. I need to see also evidence of anything. I mean, like most people, it's all very well telling me this or it's like when I was told that February was going to be significant. Until it became significant, I said, okay, so it may be or it may not be. And the same thing with, you know, the June date I was given. Something significant may happen or not. I'm not fixated on it. I'm open to it. But I think as a researcher, one of the things that I have learned is sometimes I've heard outrageous things and I've really struggled with them, but I put them in a box and I say, right, if I get more information on that, then I'll look at that again. So I've got lots of little boxes that say that's possible, that's possible, that's possible. Let's see how it unfolds. And in a way, you know, that's part of the fun because we're here on a spiritual adventure, aren't we? We're, you know, I don't want to know the future. I want to see it unfold because otherwise it's like getting a book and reading the end. I don't want the end. I want to know the process of getting to that point or whatever. But I do feel extremely positive of the outcome because I don't believe these wonderful souls have incarnated to this planet for a waste of time because that's illogical. To me, that's totally illogical. So
I'm with you on that. I absolutely am. And it's funny because we are walking in multidimensionality, even if whatever level of consciousness someone might think we have, or awareness that we might have, or even in our own field, what we might think we do or don't have, but we actually are. And so the human aspect is that one that you were referring to earlier, like how much more of this am I going to take? And that can even be with the narratives, these savior narratives, which I'm not sliding any of it because it's all part of me. But at some point, and I guess what I'm saying is it seems to me that it's driving everyone into themselves, whether they like it or not, which I think the isolation is a great physical representation of the energy of being isolated and being forced into self-introspection. So we're growing tired of all this, of serving or giving our power over or complying and being subservient. And it's like one by one, we're going to put our foot down and just say, I've had enough from here. No matter, you know what I mean? Because this is where it matters. I mean, we can make that decision just as we breathe. I mean, we don't have to go out and state it to the world or go do anything demonstrative. We can actually do that here. And I think this also seems to be moving even faster than it's been moving in these previous couple of years. It's like moving boom, 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 because of the fact that people have become more present.
I think that this, I was told that 2020 was going to be extremely significant from numerous sources, and people still are, mentioning, this is this part of this event, this huge shift in the paradigm. And one of the lovely things, and I quite enjoy Daryl Ankers and Bashar, and one of the things that Bashar was saying in December last year, which is, is worth listening to, but he said 2020 is going to be, and he said in your vernacular, nuts, and to actually be in the eye of the storm. And that made absolute sense to me. I thought, this is really about keeping your center, trusting yourself, trusting that part of you that's aware, that is guiding this, and that this is got to be for ultimately for your benefit, because everything is, that your soul is orchestrating your growth. So whatever it is, or however it happens for you, this is for you to look at yourself and to grow and to take responsibility too for your thoughts, your actions, your beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess at the end of the day, it really comes back down to the same thing, that regardless of what it is external, if it's taking your really your life force, and to some degree, away, because none of us are at such a point of an alignment that we absolutely know every answer and everything. It's just not. I think one person does that, we're probably all going to ascend. I don't know how it works, but the fact is people are being driven to themselves, and sooner or later, each one of those constructs of belief are going to be pulled away from them, whether it's the TV they watch every night, the church they can't go to anymore, the movement that they follow and that they find isn't entirely, having integrity all the way through, all the way through it. I mean, the imperfection of everything in order to drive us back to our own self-discovery and our own perfection. Really, I mean, we are the power, aren't we?
Well, this is been very much my perspective when people come to me and they're opening up multidimensionally, and what they're really just seeking is an acknowledgement of that, and a way of trusting that part of themselves. And if anything this is doing is forcing us now, because we can't go on just what we're seeing from the 3D mainstream angle, that isn't giving us what we need to understand why this is going on, what's this all about. We have to start looking at it from a bigger perspective, whether and we've been given the time to do it, because before we were so busy on the treadmill trying to earn that almighty dollar or whatever it is. Now all of a sudden, for many, well, what am I going to do? They're going out in the garden, they're connecting with nature again. They're starting to grow their own food. Some people, for example, they're having time with the kids. They're actually being able to, interact with them, do creative things with the children, and rediscovering that family bond, what have you. I mean, there are those consequences are brilliant, because it's taking us back to that source of family and each other. So whatever level you want to see this, there are benefits to this. And for however long, although I will say this, there will come a point where people will say, I'm done with this. And they're going to start challenging the narrative, the general narrative. I am certain that's going to happen.
Oh, I am too. They're talking about what, a $1,200 stimulus per person in the US. And I don't know, I know other countries are doing it, and I'm thinking to myself, as I'm not in a huge city where I'm at, I'm on the edge in a suburb, but you drive down the street and you see everything that's closed, you see the commerce is absolutely wiped out and gone. That can't last very long. That's going to affect people immediately. So, and I say, bring it on, let's bring it on. Because that, rather rip the Band-Aid off quickly than, have it, pulled off slowly, and we all know what that feels like. I love this comment by my friend Bella. She said, it's in the third eye of the storm. When you said eye of the storm, Michael has a question, and I think I can get this right. I asked him to restate it. He says, in your opinion, Mary, are we going to transform in this lifetime, or does she think this pattern that we've had will continue? That's kind of a broad question, but we can get
Well,
something.
in terms of what do you mean by transform, if it means becoming more multidimensionally aware, to go to a higher level of consciousness, I think we're in it. It's happening. You know, this is to me is why we've incarnated. We've all come to be part of this shift of consciousness, and the children coming in talk about that. They're talking about moving to a higher level of reality, if you like, realities that we are going to. Dr. Lena Olson, someone I really respect, who's an experiencer, but she's also a molecular biologist, and she is an experiencer, and she said that she saw it as moving into two frequencies, low frequency people and high frequency people. And the low frequency people will stay in 3D, but the high frequency will then transcend to another level of awareness. And so whichever way it resonates with you, for me, I feel this is the crossroads for humanity in terms of consciousness. This is, do you want this or do you want this? And we're all choosing as souls. One's better than the other. Some souls may say, I still want to do the 3D stuff as my journey of lifetime. So that's cool. And others are saying, no, now I'm ready for that next level because I want to experience that. So to me, it's all about the soul choice, and there's no good or bad in that. There is just choice. Yeah.
And I suppose that split could occur. I mean, it could be us physically, it could look the same physically. We could be walking, working side by side with, you know, someone that's in the other dimension. You know, I'm in 3D and they're in 5D, or it could be, maybe it could be like the other kingdoms that are around us that we can't see. Maybe it becomes something like that. And I don't know, but I agree with what your friend's saying. I think too many people have seen that vision, for lack of a better word, and forecasted that. You know, I would almost have to say it's a prophecy. We've even had a kid on here that had drawn two Earths in a transmission she was given. I think she was like 8 or 9 years old. So there's definitely a lot of truth to that. The Great Divide's been talked about for a long, long time. One of the other things that, and of course, I've got an active duty in it, in in a conscious union. Both people receiving information from our higher aspects and so on, and then combining our efforts. But in the work I'm doing over the last 2 months, there's been quite a few couples come on. There's been a lot of that energy that's been put before me. It seems to be expanding. Do you know anything about the conscious unions, or these couples, or whatever we might call them, and the role that they're obviously they're playing, and it seems to be expanding quite quickly?
From my understanding now, as we are connecting to each other more and more consciously, you know, groups are collecting that are of the same frequency and what have you, and that's expanding and expanding. I believe that we have all within us that awareness that when the time comes, that those protocols for this new reality will come into being. And because when people have had downloads, sometimes the downloads have been where they can translate them, but sometimes the downloads have been compressed files of codes or whatever. And they're saying, I can't unpack this code. And my feeling is that as more and more of our DNA becomes activated, the software we need is there in the codes. So that it's like the old computer and the new computer. You know, we're still in the old computer at the moment energetically, but as we move to the new, more competent computer, we're going to need new software. And I think the codes that people are getting that are coming in and being downloaded, they're not to be unpacked yet, but when the time comes, they will be unpacked. And then we've got the new operating system, because our frequency will change, our energetic, but also our physical body will also change, is the way that I come to understand it. It's got to be at a certain frequency to unpack the codes,
Yeah.
to unpack the compressed files, so that then we can operate and function, you know, to optimum, if you like. For any of those that have ever seen the movie Lucy, I think that is a good, I think, way of demonstrating what I think may be similar, in the sense that as our DNA literally becomes activated, so do we from all those other levels, and we will be totally different in every sense of the word.
Yeah, that totally resonates. Yeah, and also in regard to what is 2020, because again, several people that I've come across that are pretty credible through their work have talked about, you know, how it's not going to look the same at the end of the year. And we've already seen this. This is already, what is this, April? I can't even think. So we're coming up on Easter weekend.
Yeah.
This is Easter weekend. And I mean, God, this is crazy. I mean, January was crazy. February was crazy. And then March was crazy. And here we are. Look how fast it moves since the last time we talked, which was only 6 weeks ago. I mean, look at how fast it's moved. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because it does feel, you know, for me, and I know in observing and discussing with others and having conversations, that I don't want to say there's an information overload, but you can actually feel all this information, call it junk DNA, call it whatever you want to, but you can actually feel it. You know, it's there, more's coming in, but you know that there's so much more. I was having these thoughts today during these powerful shows today. I was having these thoughts of, wow, do I need to ask for them to open it up a little bit more? And then I'm thinking to myself, well, who's they? Can I ask myself? Do I need to make some more physical advancements? Do I need to start working out? I mean, I had all these thoughts in my head, with the ultimate being to access more of that information that I already know is stored in there. Yeah.
When people say to me, Mary, you know, I want to maximize what I'm doing, I want to, you know, be as fully functional. I want to know I'm doing everything I'm meant to be doing as a soul on my mission. And my response to that has always been, your soul is not going to let you miss the bus.
Yeah.
You know, it's worked too darn hard to get you here. It is not going to say, oh, sorry, you missed that one. It's going to make sure you don't miss it one way or another. So relax, be at peace, because you're getting exactly what you need at the time you need it. And that's, you know, this is about you trusting that other super conscious self that is giving you it as it knows your psyche can be aware of it. When I've done hypnosis sometimes, and they've wanted answers to certain questions, we talk to that higher self, that super conscious. And sometimes what will come back is, you can't take all of it now. This is as much as you're ready for, but we will give you it in increments so that you can actually integrate it without it knocking you sideways, because we know what can happen if things happen too fast on, you know, on certain levels. You know, you can literally lose the plot, as it were.
No, I that's true. I'm glad you reminded me of that, because I just went through that. You know, we had a 20-minute, this has been a week ago, I guess, maybe a little bit longer, a 20-minute interlude that was really, on the surface, nothing more than a spontaneous teenage makeout session. No petting, just kissing and holding each other. And we went up, you know, as if we were consciously wanting to connect, but we just, in that moment, we went up. And there was nothing but the cosmos. There was nothing but us. So, I mean, this was the experience, but the consequences of the experience was at 20 minutes, we basically couldn't take it. Like, the human aspect went into, my brain's getting fried. What the hell's going on? So we backed away. And over the next day or two, we talked about it a little bit, because we couldn't put our arms around it. But I think it's a great example of what you're talking about. And then I went into 3 days of basically being on my back, and my body just spewing out old, you know, whatever you want to call it, shadow or programming. And obviously with that something's going to come in or something's going to be transformed, and and the body continues its change, its evolvement. But yeah, I mean, you're right, and so many people that have gotten downloads will tell you that it's an ebb and flow, isn't it? I mean, you take it in, you integrate it, and then you go back for more.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's guided me from a lot of the hypnosis past lives, in between lives, where individuals have spoken about choosing their present life, choosing their parents, choosing their siblings, each one of them teaching them various things, and orchestrating what challenges they need in this life to activate that growth and awareness that they're seeking by the end of their lifetime. And so for me, what that really is saying is everything's there. Everything's being planned out by your higher self, your superconscious, your soul self. Really, the choice we have around that is our attitude to it. So we can either choose to see it as a victim when we have a tough time, or we can choose to see the silver lining, because there's always going to be one. And then when you can see it from that perspective, you can then take on your challenges and know that they've come, because ultimately you're going to gain out of it in terms of understanding and awareness. So all of this we've orchestrated as a consciousness, as a collective. We've chosen this as a way of waking others up, because we're the ones that are awake are going to be needed even more so soon to help the others through that transition. So we're crossing the bridge. We need to then help others to cross that bridge. So everyone that's got the awareness and has gone through this is going to be needed as a support from multiple levels to those that are then going through that journey too.
Yeah, very true. Have you had a check-in with those private groups of professionals that you helped arrange since this has all gone down? I mean, I wonder, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in one of those virtual meetings and hear what they're having to say, especially the medical people. But have you had any access to them?
I've had them on a one-to-one primarily. Interestingly, not just the medical doctors now and some professors of medicine, but also veterinarians, which is interesting, because they're of course working with the animal realm, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they're having experiences. So it's broadening out in terms of the professionals. Clinical psychologists, a lot of those. Educators, a lot of the educators are waking up. I'm also finding, of course, so many nurses and midwives and those, in that field are, owning their awareness, their healing abilities, etc., etc. So, I mean, it's not surprising, because all those professions are caring professions. You don't go into those professions unless you're naturally a healer, or you're wanting to be a healer on some level or another. So it's not surprising. But the mere fact that they are, I tell you, Todd, it still blows my mind that I have so many from the mainstream actually read my book, because it's so out there on one level. I'm talking about other planets, other beings, interdimensional parallel universes, all the rest of it, and they're reading it and it's making sense. And I'm still quite blown away that Mary's Weird World is actually making sense to other people as well.
Well, everybody's catching up with you now, I think, is what's happening. I'm sure you must feel that. Yeah, because I know you've been at this for a while. But yeah, I think people are, I mean, that must give you some, some validation, obviously, but I mean, gratification, that you're not crazy after all this time.
Well, I haven't minded being crazy on one level, because I have a lot more fun being crazy as people. But no, the bottom line is that if anyone really knows me, I'm actually a very down-to-earth kind of lady, very practical. I mean, I wouldn't have been a nurse or a midwife if I wasn't very practical or whatever. But I have never been afraid to explore the mysteries. And if something, and I work with logic. I don't, if somebody wants me to believe something, well, they've got to make it really believable for me. I've got to see the tangibility of it or whatever. So all my stuff has been, based on a good balance of left and right brain, because I've needed that.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of these that have been highly educated particularly need a baseline they can work from if they're going to start exploring this as well. And this is what's happening, is that, you know, they are now starting to explore, and this whole shift into looking at human consciousness, for example, from lots of mainstream areas where they're exploring everything, has made it a lot more acceptable anyway, which I think is heartening. But when you have, you know, publishers writing to you and asking to publish your book, I mean, both my books are, one of them's in Japanese, the New Human's going to be published by another Japanese publisher. That's Japan. You know, I've seen Japan as a likely source. I mean, you know, this is, you know, I'm now getting invites from Germany, Spain, to have it in Spanish, in French. So it is global. For those publishers to contact me and say, we're interested in your book, and it's often the New Human that even more open-minded information you could possibly get, shows that this shift is happening right across the globe, and they're seeing now that people are ready for this, which is, you know, that's very heartening, because I want to see the shift. I want to see people wake up, because I you know, I know that it's going to be a future that our kids will have they'll have a future. They'll have a real future, and a beautiful future.
Has over the last few weeks, have your sessions altered at all? I mean, especially those where you've involved hypnosis. I mean, has information come in that's you know, correlates with what's happening here, like with that 10-year-old when you asked about what his take on what was happening at present?
I'm still getting sent a lot of information from various people, and I haven't put out some of the new information that I've got from some children in Brazil. And one of them is interesting, and I haven't yet put this out, is that he's having interactions with beings that look like butterflies. They're blue beings, but they've got wings, and they look like butterflies. And what's interesting is these beings he interacts with, there's a crop circle, and I'm not sure whether it's in Holland or UK, which has almost like a butterfly man or whatever. And I'm seeing the link there, but he talks about, he did a wonderful drawing of a tall white gray being and these souls, and he said he was being shown he was one of them before he was actually incarnating, and he drew the picture of the being and the little souls, and he's one of them coming into this planet and being reminded of that. But the interesting thing about the butterflies is transformation. And I have to tell you something really fascinating here in Agnes Water is the multitude of butterflies. Never seen so many other than a butterfly park. Everywhere you look around Agnes now, you've got the butterflies everywhere. It's been like clouds of them. So whatever that's saying symbolically to me is, it's all about transformation. It's all about shift and change. And my body's going a bit interesting now.
I know how that goes.
So there you go. That's very positive.
Did he have a name for them? Was there a name for them?
He's done a drawing. I can't remember whether he's given them a name, but this is what he's been interacting with them. And there were a whole range of them, and they literally looked like humanoid butterflies.
Wow.
Which is fascinating. But the being that he mentioned that he saw that was talking to the souls, and he had them all in these almost luminous paint, was this being who was organizing which souls came to Earth, was the way he drew the picture. I haven't put any of that out yet because I'm going to pull it all together with the research. But it was so interesting seeing this crop circle that looked identical to these beings. This little 10-year-old in Brazil has drawn.
Wow, you've got quite a network with this work that you do. Jenny Kay said there's clouds of butterflies on the Gold Coast in Australia. More than she's ever seen before. Wow, I hadn't thought of that. And you know that crop circle that you're talking about, I know what you're talking about. I saw that. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know when I saw it, but I remember seeing it and think, well, that's strange. And I think on that crop circle, if I'm not mistaken, there is what looks to be a humanoid-esque type figure in the middle. You
Yeah.
know, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I don't know. So, what do you think from here? What can you I mean, you're in a big city. You're in Sydney, I think, or near
No,
Sydney.
no,
No?
I'm
Where you?
not in a big city. That's the blessing. I'm
Oh,
actually,
good. No wonder
um,
you're so calm and cool.
I'm 500 kilometers north of Brisbane on the central Queensland coast, which means
Okay.
I'm just at the lower end of the Great Barrier Reef. So
Okay.
I live in a little place called Agnes Water and the town of 1770. So we're a small town of 2 to
Oh,
3,000 maximum.
oh,
So
that's
it's
perfect.
very rural,
That's
which is
perfect.
brilliant. So I've got national park to one side, I've got the
Mm,
ocean to another. It's just a lovely community. So we don't have the same parameters as the cities.
yeah.
It's people have 4 or 40-acre blocks. You
Oh,
have chickens
so
and
it's business as usual then.
there's no change. It's
Yeah, there's
here.
no change. Yeah.
There's no change. And it's been interesting that only a few days ago, a gentleman in the locality called Deepwater has talked about seeing yowies, which are
Oh,
Bigfoot or Sasquatch,
yeah,
literally in Deepwater.
yeah, I saw something about that yesterday.
That's a couple of kilometers away from where I live.
Is that, I
Uh,
wonder, that's what I saw. And the reason I remember is because um, of the name they used, because I'd never seen that name before. And then and whatever I was reading explained that it was the elder Sasquatch.
that's right.
Yeah.
Bigfoot, Sasquatch, yowie, they're all the same.
Yeah.
Just that's the Australian name for it.
Yeah.
Literally, that's a few kilometers from where I live.
Wow.
And interestingly, I had a gentleman visit me a couple of months ago, and he got in his head, what have I got to look for? And it was the yowies. And as he looked down, there was an imprint of one of the yowie foots, which he took a picture of. And he came to me for a session. And he said, Mary, I'm so excited because I think I've got a picture of a yowie footprint. He was so excited about it, but he
Wow.
got it in his head, they're here. And he looked down and there was he actually saw the footprint of the yowie.
Oh,
So they're definitely around this area for sure.
I think they're everywhere. And
Well,
you know what I mean? But what that's telling me is that because you would think that species or whatever you want to call it, a family, is pretty close to us. I mean, they've been, they're interacted with us all over the world. But
that's
that
right.
would kind of make sense that we'd start seeing that which is closest to us first. Yeah,
Yes.
this is getting very interesting. Do you have any concluding advice for people? I mean, there are people in some really big cities. I'm not in a big city, but I've talked to some people, and they seem to have some pretty stringent quarantine rules and regulations and stuff. You hear about people being arrested. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff, and I'm not trying to doom and gloom anybody, but
Yeah.
is there something you could advise us, all of us as we move forward?
Stop watching the news would be a good one. I call it the doom and gloom show because that's what it is. Remember, it's a lot of it is just pure pop propaganda as far as I'm
Oh yeah.
concerned. So look at it with a very careful eye if you do want to see it, but at the same time, at least keep your mind open to there's more to the picture than the one that you're being shown on the telly. But
Yeah.
if you need your fear fix, watch the television.
If you need your fear fix.
But just know that look at your reality in your home, what's good about it, to keep focusing on what you're gaining rather than what you're losing from.
Yeah.
Because that's going to feed the soul and it's going to feed you, and know that everything is temporary because everything changes. Nothing stays the same from one day to the next, and there's a reason why this is happening, even if you don't fully understand it at the moment.
Yeah, great advice. And thank you, Mary, and thank you 144 people here on our 5 platforms. So thank you all for coming. It's been a great day. This is our 4th and final show. It's always wonderful to get, share space with you, Mary. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing and continue to do and have done. I wish you the best always. Peace out.
Thanks, Todd.
You
Blessings.
take care. Blessings to you.